Hi, I'm Jason, and welcome to Community Design Review, where we look at some of the best custom magic cards from the custommagic subreddit for this week. Our first shoutout of the week is Jump Scare. I really expected something scary to pop up. Right, I forgot, I'm the one doing the editing. Jump Scare for 4 and a black is an instant. Return target zombie, skeleton, spirit, nightmare, or horror card with converted mana cost 4 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. This spell costs 3 less to cast if a creature is attacking you alone. My main problem with this card is why are these the only 5 creature types that qualify as scary? Why not vampires, werewolves, shades, or dogs if you're severely allergic? I mean, people could be scared of just about anything. This should really say return target creature with a creature type to the battlefield. The flavor here is cool, and I like the cost reduction if the creature is attacking alone. I almost feel like you don't need the converted mana cost cap on this card, seeing as this is a Rise Again that's really specific in the creatures it can target. Now yes, it is an instant, and it can cost very cheap if a creature is attacking alone, but that's such a situational use that it's probably not going to happen too often exactly when you want it, so I think it's totally fine to not have a cap on this. In addition, most of these creature types aren't going to be the biggest of creatures anyway. It's not like you're able to get demons or worms or, things like that. Our second shout out for the week is
Long live the king.
1 and a white for a sorcery, you become the monarch if a creature died this turn. Proclaim 1 black, which is as you draw this card, you may reveal it and pay the cost 1 black to proclaim it. When you proclaim Long Live the King, destroy target creature. This card is just dripping with sweet, buttery flavor. As a white player, if the king dies, it would be your duty and obligation to become the king in order to save the kingdom. But with a little bit of finagling and black mana in there, you can actually kill the king in order to become the monarch. So really sweet design here, and I think a pretty decent card too. Our first meme card of the week is a moral lesson, which is cheating is wrong. 1 and a black for a sorcery, search your library for a basic swamp card, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Now you may be asking yourself, why is this silver border? It just looks like a bad color-specific rampant growth. But there's a short phrase that's missing that's on every single card that searches your library to put a card into your hand, unless that card searches for literally any card, like a demonic tutor. And that phrase is reveal it. Without telling you to reveal it, there's no way to ensure that you are actually getting a basic swamp. Unless if somebody's standing over your shoulder, you can use this to get basically anything in your deck. According to the rules, you're only allowed to get a basic swamp with this card. But if you're playing in an unset, there's a pretty big implication that this card is in fact actually supposed to get you anything, but I guess we'll just have to see how shady of a character you are to see how you're going to play this card. This week we started getting Commander's Legend spoilers, and one card in particular stuck out to a lot of people, which is Jeweled Lotus. Now because this card includes one of the 3 magic words, it's gotten a lot of hype, despite the fact that it's not actually that good. Because of that, we have 2 parody cards to look at. First one is JACK-THE-RIFFER. 0 mana for an artifact, tap, sacrifice JACK-THE-RIFFER, add 3 mana of any one color. Spend this mana only to cast cards that cost $1 or less, use TCG player prices. No period. As you should all know, WotC doesn't acknowledge the secondary market. That means they would never print a card that has a reference to dollar amounts because they don't believe that any cards have any value. They're just selling a bunch of cardboard with some cool images on them. So I don't know why you continue to make cards like this that they clearly would never print! And our second Jeweled Lotus parody is Jeweled Dreadmaw.
No, God!
0 mana for an artifact. Tap, sacrifice Jeweled Dreadmaw.
No, God, please, no!
Add 4 green.
No!
Spend this mana only to play cards named Colossal
No!
Dreadmaw.
No!
Now that we've managed to endure those meme cards of the week, let's take a look at number 5. Panharmonica. 1 mana for an artifact. Tap, sacrifice Panharmonica. The next time an artifact or creature entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers a second time. This is a one-shot Panharmonicon, which seems pretty cool, but I think you're only going to want to put it in your deck if you have really powerful ETB effects. So I would use it with things like Phage the Untouchable, Eater of Days, or Lord Tressorhorn, to really pack a punch. To you, I guess. And number 4 for this week is Ad Infinitum. White-blue for an instant, you draw a card and you gain 2 life. 2 white-blue, exile Ad Infinitum from your graveyard, you draw 2 cards and gain 4 life. 6 white-blue, put Ad Infinitum on the bottom of its owner's library, you draw 4 cards and gain 8 life. Activate this ability only while Ad Infinitum is in exile. This card is really good. In a lot of limited games, this is going to draw you 3 cards and gain you 6 life for 6 mana broken up over 2 increments. But in some limited games where you go really late and you can get to 8 mana, it's going to draw you a total of 7 cards and give you 14 life, which is insane. Now, I really like the fact that it does, in fact, go infinite because it just keeps changing zones and you can keep getting it back. And I think it's right that it goes on the bottom of your library, but I will say if you're not able to shuffle it into your library in some way, by the time you draw it, you won't have a deck left to draw cards from. So it's not really helpful at that point, but you've already gotten so much value that I think it's obviously totally fine. And if we're thinking about this in Commander, this is probably just an auto include in most white-blue decks because, well, blue has a lot of already great ways to draw cards. This breaks it up into increments so well that I think it would be worth it. You can definitely find a spot to cast it for 2 mana to cycle. Sometime you're going to be able to take, half a turn, maybe a whole turn to draw 2, exile it for 4 mana. Eventually you'll get to 8 mana where you can use it on somebody else's end step going into your turn, and you're just going to draw basically a new hand of cards. So this is a really cool card and kind of a new Sphinx's Revelation type. A lot like Collection Plate from last week, this week's number 3 also has to do with nerfing your opponent's searching of libraries. Notion taxes 1 and a white for an enchantment with whenever an opponent searches their library, create a treasure token. As previously mentioned, assuming you're using this in a Commander game, you're going to get quite a few treasure tokens off of it. Especially at 2 mana, it's going to be extremely powerful. If you're lucky enough to be the first player, you're going to even be able to catch your opponent's rampant growths and things like that in order to get treasure tokens from them, which is going to ramp you quite a bit more than your opponent's. Then again, the mana is only one-time use, unlike the lands that they're getting from their cards, so it might be okay, but this seems like a card that could definitely be broken and might need to be a little bit more expensive. Number 2 for this week is Unnecessary Side Quest. MTG Sappy, please come see me after class. You've been skipping your spelling assignments again. Unnecessary Side Quest is 2 blue for a sorcery. Each creature goes on an adventure. I really appreciate the flavor for this card, though despite all the different words, this card is not very different from an evacuation. Exile basically just becomes everyone's second hand at this point, and while this lets players get around discarding those cards and things like that, it's not too different from evacuation where I feel like it really needs to be a card. All I'm trying to say is that this card is quite unnecessary. And number 1 for this week is White Lies, 2 and a white for an instant until end of turn. If an opponent would draw a card, instead that player gains 3 life. The first time White's inability to draw cards and instead gain lots of life has actually been beneficial. This card can definitely be a good way to snipe your opponent's draw spell for a turn, but overall it's really not that great. You are getting them to lose a bunch of cards, but you're still giving them a lot of life. Sure, 30 life is probably worse than 10 cards, but you're still using one of your cards to give your opponent 10 life. In a Commander-like game, which is, where I always assume most of these weird janky cards are going to go, you're still down a card and one of your opponents is down several cards, but then the other 2 players gain a lot of advantage off of that. Even still, I like this design, it's definitely unique, and I'd love to see more creative designs like this. That's all we have for this week. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and stop making Colossal Dreadmaw cards.